Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and it's time for the patch 16.5 rundown. And for real this time, I'm not going to screw up the audio. I am joined by Tim. Tim, how are you doing?
I was thinking about muting myself and talking, but hopefully you guys can hear me this time.
Nice, that would have been a good prank. All right, so Tim, any high-level thoughts before we get into the changes on where things are at right now or how the patch is going?
The 16.4, the patch that's just ending, was kind of about the same patch, which is not the worst thing in the world, right? The patch before was pretty stable, pretty good. But now we've had two patches of really 4 cost and now 5 cost dominant strategies. And so this patch, we're taking a really big swing at um, opening up their strategies, the main ones being 2 and 3 cost reroll. So you're going to see some pretty heavy shifts there. But we're not just focused on those areas. We're focusing on some of the 5 costs, mainly T-Hex, that also you put in a ton of work and you don't really get that cool reward. So those are the things we're focusing on. And then the other big chunk of the patch is going to be a pretty big augment pass of, hey, these augments, not only are they weak, they're just too narrow kind of. They're not exciting to pick. So some more deeper augment work there.
Sweet. Sweet. Well, won't keep you waiting. Let's dive right in and jump through the changes. All right, first one. The only unlocked change this time is Silas, and this is an interesting one because you're not going to have to sell Jarvan, Lux, and Garen, only Jarvan and Garen, but you are going to have to be level 9, and that's going to be the trade-off. So overall, should be easier-ish, but I don't know. The level 9 kind of makes it harder. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like easier or harder. I would say the thing that helps us the most here is consistency, which is it's going to be hard to go 9, but if you go 9 and you really want Silas from a Demacia opener or from a Jarvan 2 opener, you can get him. You're not as beholden to the RNG of did I hit Lux and Garen as well? And that consistency lets us bring up his power level, which you're going to see a little bit later of like, hey, he's going to feel like a level 9 champion. He's not going to be balanced around maybe you get him on 8, maybe you get him on 9. You can't get him in Arcanist comps. You can't get him in whatever comps you guys cook up, and that'll give us the consistency to give him power.
Sweet. All right, cool. On the trait side, Arcanist, the team-wide AP is going down pretty much at all levels. So that basically if you're playing the 2-piece, you're going to get a little less AP. And if you're playing the 4 and the 6, the power should actually be in the Arcanist, not the non-Arcanist. So you can see at the 4 and 6, the Arcanist AP actually goes up by 10%, which is pretty good, but less at the team-wide. Demacia 5 and 7, the armor and MR going down by 5. They've been very, very tanky for a long time. Ishtal, just a couple of mission adjustments here. Play Ishtal for 13 rounds is now 15. That one was a little too good. Remember, it used to be 17, so we're trying the middle here. And then the have less than 30 health reward, that one's going to be lowered a bit, considering there's also ways to cheese it a little bit by like taking out Ishtal for a while and stuff like that. So it just ends up being less beneficial. And then Noxus has been kind of the underperforming vertical for a long time, especially compared to Ionia and Demacia. So the 5 and the 7 are getting more bonus attack speed, and the 5-piece is getting more bonus health, so that if you want to run some of those 5 Noxus comps in stage 4, 5, and 6, they'll have a bit more. And finally, Void. Void, if you get the Royal Husk as your 4-piece, it just feels a lot worse than the other option. And so by changing it to percent health, this should actually put it on par with the other tank option as well.
Yeah, go running through these. Again, Arcanist is probably one of the few like semi-vertical comps that hasn't been working for a while. It was good in the first patch, but we buffed Annie a couple patches ago and it still didn't see some success. So we want to hopefully see more of that trait, specifically around the 4-piece, more Annie, more Lux outside of Demacia. Going on to that, Demacia, we kind of only see one variation of Demacia, which is kind of against our goals for the initial set that we set out, which is, hey, you could flex around the 3-piece and the 5-piece, but nowadays everyone is just playing the 7, and if you're really rich on 7 and you can go 9, maybe you drop down to 5. So no 3 Demacia Lux, no 3 Demacia Garen, and we think that's kind of the signal that the trade is a little too strong and the other classes are not as good. Ishtal, more kind of touched on it. These are just very easy quests, kind of taking out the risk of Ishtal, and Ishtal is really, really good right now, so taking that out. Noxus, just like Arcanist, is one of the mid-tier comps that hasn't been succeeding. This is going to help both the carry potential of Otacon and the aura potentials, right? The attack speed is going to mean he stacks up that damage amp a little bit faster, because I think a good thing people brought up was just, hey, would I rather play 5 Noxus for an aura, which is HP and damage amp, or 2 Arcanist? And I think in the past, 2 Arcanist was heavily the option. So hopefully that evens it out. And then Void, this is, as Mort mentioned, the one that feels a little bit too weak. And so we bring it up and it should be a lot better late game.
Great. Cool. Let's keep going. One costs. There are none. They're all perfectly balanced. All the one costs are perfectly balanced. So, no. But none of this patch. Two costs, though, as Tem mentioned, big focus here on two costs and three costs. So, two costs. Aphelios getting a pretty chunky buff here, especially at 3-star. So, this will be pretty cool to see. Ashe, you're seeing a buff and a nerf number here. This is a buff, just straight up. Let's be clear. This is a buff. Ashe will do more damage with her auto attacks, and the arrows are based off that anyway. So it makes her stack a little worse, but overall, if you get like an Ashe out of an orb, this should be much more playable. So cool. Graves 3 being a little less of a bait. So Graves 3 gets a buff. And then Orianna has been overperforming a little bit at 1-star and 2-star. So getting a small nerf, but 3-star actually getting a buff if you want to invest in like an Orianna for like reroll or something like that.
Yeah, this is going to be a running theme for the 2 and 3 cost champs, which is getting them to 3-star just isn't worth the opportunity cost compared to the 4 and 5 costs. So you're going to see a lot of the heavier buffs be on that 3-star end. For Aphelios, a lot of the Targon units, pretty good item holders at 1 and 2-star, but when you get to 3-star, was it worth playing this unit? And specifically for them, they don't have traits to power them up. So they're going to get a pretty hefty bump there. Ashe, I think Ashe trend is like right below the bar. But we know that comp can't snowball out of control. We've seen a lot of clips of, hey, my fully stacked Tryndamere beat a 3-star unit, 3-star 4 or 5 cost, which is crazy. So we didn't want to buff that too hard, but we're buffing Ashe, which is a baseline buff to the comp. And you can play Ashe as a better item holder as a transition. Graves, since with that TF buff, we've really only seen people chase 3-star TF. 3-star Graves has kind of fallen off as like not even an option. So we want to add that back. And Orianna, again, after her small nerf to her shield, she didn't really carry her weight as a 3-star unit, but at 1 and 2-star was really good. So focusing on the 3-star there.
Okay. Then finishing out the 2 costs, Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is a beast. I think Rek'Sai at 1 and 2-star does a lot of work, can carry things, but have you ever seen a 3-star Rek'Sai? Are they ever really worth pursuing? Not really. Tim already kind of covered this. And then Yasuo. I think Yasuo just is one of those lines that we wanted to be really good with like Yone and stuff like that, but it can from a high roll position, but generally not overall. And so buffing it at every level actually makes Yasuo a little bit more worth itemizing early, makes it more possible to get there, and so should open up that Yasuo Yone line.
Yeah, Rek'Sai is pretty straightforward, just not good enough at 3-star. Yasuo, if you ever try to item hold this guy, he doesn't feel that great. So he's getting a buff across the board. He's a little bit too conditional, thinking about the Ionia pass and the artifacts. And if we speak about artifacts, we see that, hey, we buffed Trynd Ashe, we buffed Graves, we buffed Rek'Sai and Yasuo. Don't freak out too much because I know Dark Scythe was a huge enabler of them. Scythe is going to be hit a little bit for the 3-star scaling so that we can bring up the baseline champions as well.
Sweet. All right, 3 costs. Again, going to go through these pretty quick here, but Darius buffed at all levels. This guy just still underperforming despite all the bug fixes and everything. Mundo gets a slight buff at 2-star and a really big buff at 3-star. Mundo 3, unfortunately, the heal just taking a lot of time just is really challenging here. Jinx getting another buff. No bugs at least, but Jinx is getting buffed up to be more worth it, especially at 3-star. LeBlanc, same thing, 3-star buff here for LeBlanc. The combination of Darius, LeBlanc, and Draven now hopefully will make something happen there. And then finally, Leona getting more flat damage reduction here. So there's those.
Yeah, something Mort probably has observed over 20 million sets of TFT is that healing tanks fall off a cliff really, really fast.
Yep.
So this is our attempt of, hey, you're healing, you're going to get taxed later, especially if you're a heal over time like Mundo. We're going to buff that up pretty hard so you can actually compete at 3-star with those 4-cost tanks. Jinx, just a little bit weaker, a little bit slow, just a small bump up. 3-star her was definitely not worth it based off how she worked. LeBlanc, pretty good at 1 and 2-star, but really struggled to kill anything tanky on stage 4 and stage 5. So bumping that up so she can actually eat through that front line and try to win a fight. Leona, just again, similar to Aphelios, chasing her 3-star, you'd hit her on accident and it'd be like, I still want to itemize Taric 2 over her. That shouldn't be a thing, especially with Diana. So that's the first few 3 costs.
Okay. Malzahar, my favorite. Little buff at 1 and 2-star, bigger buff at 3-star. Yes, we're aware the double trouble comp exists. It'll be fine. Sejuani, 3-star buff, bigger shield. Cool. Vayne, 3-star. We've seen Vayne 3 kind of fall off and not really be a playable thing, so get this back there. And then finally Zoe. Zoe pretty good at 1 and 2-star, but 3-star never really worth it. So pretty big buff to Zoe 3.
Yeah, repeating a lot of the same things from the last slide, which means it's more of a systemic thing now that people have kind of solved set 16, which is chasing these 3-star units, not worth it. They don't hold up in the late game against the 4-cost tanks or the 5-cost carries. So we're really focusing on, hey, we're pushing this pretty hard so that Zoe 3 or Vayne 3 or Sedge 3 can really hold up. Definitely on stage 4, and only until stage 5 are you going to be like, okay, maybe I should start adding those legendaries to my board to try and win.
Yep, cool. All right, 4 costs. Not a ton here, but Belveth, I think, is just a little bit above the other 4 costs. In particular, what'll happen with Belveth is once she gets a kill or two, kind of snowballs. And so we're just lowering that so that, like, if you're struggling a little bit, Belveth won't be any weaker, but the snowball fights, she's going to not quite snowball as hard. Noxus, this guy, I want this guy to be, like, the best 4-cost tank because he's supposed to secretly be, like, a 4.5-cost tank. He's just not really there considering how hard he is to get, so buffing him up a bit I think will help. Swain, the most played champion of all of TFT, I think. Would we see it as high as like 4.1, I think? So that being said, we don't want to like nerf him too hard. We want him to be a viable tank. Part of this is just the set design, the way his traits are. We did also nerf 2 Arcanist, as you saw. But we are going to lower his starting mana so that maybe Swain 1 with no items isn't getting his cast. And then finally, Yunara. This one's confusing. I didn't mark it as a buff or nerf, but I think overall it will actually be a nerf, would be my read on it, is because generally if you have AP from any source, not just Titans, I know her best in slot was Titans, but even like 7 Ionia could give AP. The AP scaling is off of the attack speed. So if you had, even just like 2 Arcanist, that attack speed would be higher than 80. So baseline, it'll be a buff in some cases. A lot of cases, it'll be a nerf. She'll do a little bit more damage, but overall, this should make her itemization more intuitive as well.
Yep, running through these with a little bit more detail. Belveth and Swain, kind of the best default line on the patch right now. This is not meant to hit that line too much. It kind of lets us shift power into Aatrox, which is, he's going to get another buff, which we'll see later. Noxus, as Mort said, he should be the best 4-cost tank. Right now, I think he's not bad. He's as good as Garen, which doesn't really make sense for what you have to do to get him. And Swain, as Mort said, a lot of that presence is going to be due to the trait web. So this isn't really going to lower him from like 4 in a game to like 2 a game. But we're also seeing that the comps that have Swain as a main tank and a secondary tank are the best comps in the game. So that unitemized Swain getting hit here, I think when I did the math on this, it's about like a 7 to 8% buff on the damage on the AP part, but losing all that AP scaling. And again, Ionia has a lot of AP scaling. A lot of augments have AP scaling. Her itemization had AP scaling. So it's going to be probably a small nerf to her, but not as big if you're going to go that Kraken or AD heavy build.
Sweet. All right, 5 costs. Aatrox. This guy still doesn't really want Bloodthirster, which was kind of the whole point of the design. So going to keep cranking up that Omnivamp to AD conversion so that if you put those Omnivamp items on him, you get more power. Great. Asol. Asol's pretty close, but the gap between 1-star and 2-star is just a little wide. Don't get me wrong, it should be wide in the sense that 2-starring your 7 cost should feel really good, but just a little too much. So buff at 1-star, nerf at 2. Lucian and Senna, this is technically a buff, but it's a bug fix, which is just if Lucian gets stunned, you won't lose the spell. So that's going to be nice. And then Mel, we're fixing the bug where she was getting progress while she was dead for Radiant items, which was leading to some pretty silly cheeses where you could like put her in the front line and get a bunch of orbs and farm a bunch of Radiant items. But to compensate, we're going to make that Radiant item take 10 less. So.
Yep, Aatrox is something we really want to feel good about. When you hit 2-star Belveth and you hit 2-star Aatrox, you kind of still feel like Belveth is the better and more consistent carry, which doesn't make sense. Aatrox, the gap, as we said, is a little bit too big. Again, he's still going to feel really good at 2-star. This is not going to be a huge nerf to that, but hopefully a little bit healthier when you get there, so you have a chance to get him. Lucian, again, just a bug fix. And Mel, there was also a bug here where she would stack on PvE rounds. I think in the patch notes, we're going to write that no longer happens. So she only stacks during player combat now. So again, compensating for 10, it's a little bit easier.
Cool. Silas, you saw the unlock condition change. He also gets more attack speed, so he can get to his cast quicker. And the Jarvan cast, the one where he puts himself in their back line and makes himself the target and then dies right after, will at least now be more worth it and will do a bunch of damage. So pretty big buff here for Silas in that term. Zillion's a good champ, especially if he can start getting some kills and those things start exploding. But he's just not quite the 5 cost we want him to be, so a little extra dot damage I think will help. This will also be nice if you're like stuck on some tanks and actually getting to do some damage and you can't get those explosions. And then finally T-Hex. And this is going to look scary if you're like looking at these numbers. You're like, excuse me, you're doubling his spell? Like, what? But the big thing here, and Tim can go into a little bit more detail, is basically the first target hit by the beam gonna take a lot more damage, right? This is so that he can burst through things like Rift Herald and Garen and those frontline tanks, but everything after it is gonna take a lot less damage. You can see here the fall off went from 35% to 70%. That is a very large fall off. So even the second target hit isn't gonna take as much, but this should hopefully allow him to actually be able to kill a tank, actually get back to a second cast, and be a little healthier shape for this beam spell.
Yeah, I'm going to run through the first 2 champs pretty quick so we can talk about T-Hex. Silas, you see Arcanist buff, Silas unlock condition, small sway nerf. So hopefully Arcanists are back. But Silas, that Jarvan spell was really bad for him. I ran a bunch of fights, and whenever he casted the Garen spell with the Lux spell, he looked really good. If he cast Jarvan, he would jump in and kill himself. And so this hits it on both axes where it actually does damage now. And 2, he can get out of there faster with his second cast if needed. Zillion, this is a kind of a concept about like default AP lines. They feel a little bit weaker now because your caps in the generic 5 cost space are Annie and Zillion, both of which don't feel like they compare to Kindred and Senna and Lucian, right? Would you rather have those, or would you rather play Zillion? So hopefully evening that out. Then T-Hex, okay. You watch a bunch of T-Hex fights, this guy does one thing. He casts one time. If the cast is bad, you instantly lose the fight. If you cast into a tank, you instantly lose the fight because you never get a second cast and you never kill the tank. So all of his success condition was, can I get a really good cast that kills enough useful units so that my team can live so I can maybe get a second cast? But this whole change is meant to address that, give him more options to win a fight. So 1, he's going to cast more. So you can actually see 2 casts in a fight. This is kind of a concept where if you only cast 1 time a fight, that 1 cast has to literally win the fight for you, which is not very healthy. The mana consume, he's going to cast the same amount of time, but he's going to cast more often. And that spell damage makes sure, hey, there's another way you can win a fight, which is you go front to back rather than killing the backline first. So we're putting a lot of that power in killing Rift Herald, Garen, your 3-star 3 costs that are going to be on this meta. Because your 2-star legendary with items that's eating another unit should probably be able to kill a unit in its first cast. Yeah, we send this a lot. Looks really scary. He doesn't delete your board in 2 seconds. I'll be very, very shocked. I think I owe somebody a lot of money if that ever happens. But don't be surprised by this number. He should be a lot more functional in a fight.
Nice. Dinosaurs are back, baby. All right, items and artifacts. Thieves' Gloves. This is like a buff and a nerf. That's a buff in the sense that you're never going to get Morello and Sunfire anymore. So that's sweet. But some of the stage 4 combinations are going to be a little weaker. We've just seen Thieves' Gloves overperform a little bit. This is not going to move the needle a ton, but just calling it out that we did it. Darkened Scythe, Tim already mentioned it a little bit, but more base AD, but less on the slash damage to compensate for a lot of the champions that use it getting buffed. Darkened Staff, less AP, more mana regen, but the proc is actually going to hit a lot harder. We've just seen the proc not be very satisfying or existing. So going from, 100 to 300 late game should feel pretty good. And then finally, Flicker Blades. There's some champions it's been kind of overperforming on with and will do really well. Flicker Blade Jinx, for example, I think would have been really scary if we let it ship as is. So Flicker Blades is going to get nerfed back down to 5% per attack.
Yeah, TG, just small nerf. It's been performing really, really well. Kind of loses their RNG aspect when you put it on fighters. So we're trying to hitting that slightly, but not a huge change. Darkened Scythe, just a shift. As we said, 3-star units get much higher base AD. So that slash does more on them. This is just compensation. So should still be good on like Mbessa and stuff like that. Darkened Staff is kind of the reverse, where the stats were like okay, but the effect, if you ever watched it at any point in the game, did like 50 damage after mitigation, which wasn't cool at all. So even though this says you're like, oh my god, 300 damage, it'll be mitigated to like 150. So even on a Sona, this isn't gonna be like mind blowing. The Flicker Blades, kind of like the one artifact that's like pushing our preset statement about artifacts right now, which is like it's one of the highest win rate artifacts, one of the most picked, really, really good on Kindred and Senna and a bunch of these champions. It's just needs a small tap down.
Yep. Sweet. All right, then we have augments. Now, there are 3 pages of this, and sorry, Froden, I know you're doing your review of this rundown. I'm not going to sit here and read every single one of these. You're going to have to do that for your audience. I'm sorry. But overall, like I said, we did a lot of augment passes here. You can see a lot of notes. I'll leave the page up for a bit, but while I do that, Tim, are there any you think are worth covering here?
Yeah, so kind of on this first page, I'll go over the general like buff idea. We're just going to nerf the augments that are really out of line. Of course, I think we'll see a couple of them later. But for the buffs, it's not just about buffing something that's weak and just changing the number. A lot of these augments, you see them and you're like, well, I would pick that if I was in the perfect spot and it'd be fine. A lot of times you're not in that perfect spot, so you instantly disregard it and it becomes a dead choice. So you'll see kind of more mechanics changes here than you would normally see. I think an exciting one is aura farming going to 4-2. That should be just fun.
Whew.
Yeah, so people who like to gamble. Big Friend and Component Heist are kind of like, hey, how can we get people on board on this augment a little bit better? Which is Big Friend, I'm only clicking if I can actually have a Warmogs or a 3-star unit. But now, hey, I get a little bit of a pathway there. Component Heist says, okay, if I live this round, I get an okay reward, right? It works for Golden Egg because we're giving you a huge amount of stuff. But Component Heist is just 2 more components than Buried Treasure. So
Yep.
a little bit of a kickstart. For Crown's Will and Spear's Will, the ones that give you an item, we also have Swordsmith and Staffsmith in the game. So when you compare the two, you're just like, what's fun? When am I supposed to take this? And so we think 2 components on these gives you a little bit more creativity and direction, and you get a little bit less stats. But again, the stats here are not going to be like the most compelling thing and don't really give context. Dragon Guard, small nerf. And then Dumbify is another cool one that hopefully will be more exciting to take. We found that with Dumbify, even if it's good, it's really kind of scary and takes a lot of money to rebuild the board. And so we're giving you kind of a kickstart, which is say, hey, you've lost your whole board. Here's a 2-star backliner or a carry, like a fighter, that can use that big dummy you have, build a board around that, and stabilize, so then you can really get into your team a little bit better.
Nice.
That's kind of it for this page.
Cool. Second page, again, like we got 3 pages to go through here. So again, not going to read them all here. Some buffs, couple nerfs. What's worth covering, Tim?
So here, I think the 3 most exciting ones, or most important ones, Golemify, similar change to Dumbify, but you're going to get a 3 cost here. Hopefully that's more clickable. Hefty rolls, there's kind of a trend with reroll augments on 2-1, where if you take a reroll augment, you're like worse off because the best reroll augments are the ones that give you econ, so you can make 50 as fast as possible and roll. Hefty rolls, I think, is really cool when it gets online, but you just never get the 50 gold. So the first time you ever roll is 3-1, which is not that good. But if we're gonna buff it, I think pretty heftily for a gold 2-1 augment, Prismatic Ticket, that interaction we're gonna have to remove for now. We'll see how it performs. Maybe it can come back, but I've gotten to like 1200 HP on this thing. It's kind of crazy. We don't want to balance around 1 augment exactly.
Yep.
Also, Bard's in the game. So like Bard plus Prismatic Ticket means like insane stuff. Max build, still a little bit too good even after last patch. Pushing it back a little bit, lowering that initial power spike. And then Promise Protection probably has the biggest line here, which is a lot of these edge case bugs now work. A lot of people didn't know that if you stacked multiple Protector's Vows, you don't get more mana, which seems kind of like counterintuitive for an item augment. So that works now. So stack all your vows as possible and have your Swain cast 30 times. Go nuts.
I'm going to do that now. I will absolutely take a screenshot of triple vow Swain and send it to you, Tim. So that's definitely happening.
You try that.
Yeah. Cool. And then we have the last page here. Again, not going to read them all here. Salute to solo leveling. Finally got a nerf. But otherwise, anything worth talking about here?
Spear's Will, same change. I think Trials of Twilight, I think just following up from last patch, it was really, really good. So Kent hopefully top forward with this. And if he didn't, you can go yell at him because this is an insanely good augment. We're lowering the initial power. We're taking away one of the Zinzaos, so it's weaker than the gold augment, but you get a BT and you get those dupes later, so I think it'll feel fine. I think kind of a mechanics thing here, which is Twin Guardians. You're going to get HP, so your units are going to get a little bit chunkier on the HP bar, and those stats just work a little bit better together. Warlord starts with 1 stack, a little bit easier to get into. And then we stick together. This is a common story that Mort's told me, which is people get Warden, we stick together. The thing that gives you attack speed and offensive stats. Let's go. So now your prismatic augment won't screw you. That's always a good thing to do.
Yep. I think the only other two I'd want to talk about here is Treasure Hunt. Treasure Hunt was one that, I mean, when it's not reroll heavy, is really, really bad, and it's been in the Monday morning meta report for a while. But now, hopefully, with some rerolls getting better in conjunction with this buff, this augment should be playable. And then the other one was World Runes. I think World Runes, when it first came out with the new version, I think a lot of people were like, wait, this looks OP. It was not OP. It was actually pretty bad. But now, I mean, if you can get to the 3 or was it 4 origins you have to have active? Yeah. If you can get that quick, 6 XP a turn should be good. Hopefully this helps it, because I want this augment to be good. I want it to be like get to rise quick. So we'll see. If we have to do more from here, we will. But I'm glad to see this one get a pretty sizable buff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Tack Kitchen is also on here, but I don't think it'll be like too crazy. But it just looks like a big change. But it goes from 3-1 to like
2-5,
2-6, I think maybe
2-5.
Yeah, 2-5.
Yeah. So okay. And then finally, bug fixes. Not a ton, unfortunately, this time, but Evolve and Overcome's tooltip has been adjusted to reflect it only triggers on champion takedowns. And Ishtal's end combat with no items on bench quests no longer progresses if the trait is not active. So just a little bit of an Ishtal manipulation there that you could do. But otherwise, that's it. So like I said, it's mostly a buff patch, little nerf here and there, but mostly buffs, a lot of augments, things like that hopefully open it up even more. So yeah, that's the patch. And so as always, the patch will come out on Wednesday and should be fun as we start to head into the end of the set. I think there's only 3 more patches after this. Is that right?
Yep, I think there's only 3 more.
So pretty crazy. It's been hopefully a good set for everybody. So Tim, any closing thoughts?
No, none for me.
All right, well, cool. Well, again, thank you, everybody. Hopefully you enjoy as we head towards the end of the set and the next set. Good luck to everybody who's competing in various tournaments. Hopefully you make it, and can't wait to see whose championship augment we get to make next at some point. So should be fun. All right, that's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.